And our presenter is Lisa Ann Edwards. She's a partner of Bloom Coaching Institute. That's an organization that advances coaching effectiveness through research, tools, training, and consultation of ROI. As head of talent management for Corbis, which is a Bill Gates privately owned global media company, Lisa was responsible for leadership development and coaching programs. She's a contributing author to trade publications and has authored or contributed to the following books: Measuring the Success of Coaching, a step-by-step guide to measuring impact and calculating ROI. So that was an ASTD Press publication that came out a couple years ago, and that was a great book, by the way. And then also Integrated Talent Management Scorecards. That's the most recent book that she's been affiliated with. So everyone, please join me in welcoming to the ICF Business Development Series, Lisa Edwards.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mark. Well, I'm really delighted to be here with you today. You know, I always love working with coaches through ICF. It's such a great organization, and it's really such a privilege for me to be with such a great group of coaches. So thank you for the honor of being with you here today. And today I'm going to show you how measuring the ROI of coaching can help you win clients and get paid more. And I'm guessing that many of you may be wondering if it's even possible to measure business impact and return on investment of coaching. So for those of you who are wondering about that, stay tuned. I'm going to be walking through a case study to illustrate how it actually works. But I can imagine that many of you are also wondering, is it really necessary to measure business impact and ROI of coaching? Because I am guessing that when you work with your coachees, you can see the transformation, you can see the changes, and you know that coaching works. So is it even necessary to measure business impact and ROI? So for those of you who are thinking that, I want to share with you a little bit of why I believe it's necessary to measure business impact and ROI. And so the story sort of starts off with me telling you a little bit about my mentor. This is my mentor. His name is Dick Damrow. And I actually met him a number of years ago. He came into my life during a time where I was really looking for new direction. I had been successful in my career, but I wasn't really fulfilled. And I wanted to find a new way to kind of use my talents and feel a little more fulfilled in the work that I was doing. And frankly, I was fairly lost. And Dick was instrumental in helping me change my career path. And because of him, I'm able to be here with you today because he was that influential for me. He introduced the idea of coaching to me a number of years ago, and he helped me reshape and redefine my career. And so now, as Mark mentioned, I'm a partner of Bloom Coaching Institute, where we advance coaching effectiveness through tools, research, training, and consultation using the ROI methodology. But prior to that, I was head of talent management at Corbis, which is a company based here in Seattle, and I did all kinds of things from leadership development, executive coaching, management development, all the way to employee surveys, new hire orientation, and so on. So again, because of this man, I was able to really change my life because he was willing to invest in me. What's interesting to me is that at the same time that I started meeting with him, I was also working with a career coach. And I could have the picture of my career coach on this slide, but I don't. And I don't because I only met with her 5 times. And I only met with her 5 times because although the conversations were, interesting, and I was learning so much about myself, I was gaining a lot of awarenesses, it was expensive, and I couldn't see how it was going to pay off for me. And so I stopped going to career coaching, and I think that that sort of story illustrates really what happens for some of our clients and why this concept of measuring impact, value, and return on investment is so important for our clients. Because although it sometimes feels uncomfortable to try to put coaching in the context of money, our clients see our work as an investment. And so if we really want to help our clients, we have to help them understand how their investment with us is going to pay off. So just like all of these investments that are illustrated here on this slide, when our clients invest in us, they don't just invest for the experience and the insights and what they get out of the conversations with us. They also invest with us because they expect that it's going to somehow pay off for them, just like all of these investments that are illustrated here on this slide represent. So if we want to earn business with our prospective clients or keep business with our current clients, we have to illustrate for them how it's a worthwhile investment for them. But there's another reason, so that's kind of from our client's perspective, but there's another reason why looking at coaching in the context of money is also important, and that has to do from our own perspective. So many of us are doing this work, including me, because we believe in the potential of people, and we find a lot of meaning and joy in helping other people. But if we don't have the money that we need to support our work, we cannot continue our mission. And this is an especially relevant topic for both coaches as well as people who are self-employed. So those of you who are in the U.S., you may be aware of this statistic, which is that the IRS reported in 2012 the average self-employed person made $26,000. And I know that in some recent research from the ICF, the average coach made $46,000, or a little bit more than $46,000. So while those are, that's great money to have, we don't want to look down at that. For us to continue our mission, it's important that we have the financial resources to be able to continue our work. So it's important to our clients. It's also important to us in terms of sustaining our mission and doing our work. And for those of you who are on the call who are new to coaching, it's important to you in order to get your business going. So I found this slide here that represents sort of the startup curve, and this comes from Paul Graham. It really is designed to represent technology businesses, but I think it represents all businesses, because all businesses go through this period, where we have this, in the beginning of the business, we have this initial enthusiasm, and then reality sets in, and we go through what feels like a dip, but really what's happening is we're trying to understand the market and how our services fit into the marketplace. And for some people, this dip lasts, 5 minutes. For others, it might last 5 months. And for others, it may last, 5 years. It can last for a long period of time. But we have to have enough cash in our business. As business owners, we have to have enough cash to make it through this period while we're trying to understand our market and fit our services into the marketplace. So once again, money is important to sustaining our mission, keeping our business alive, and serving our clients. So for any of you who are wondering, how is money important to coaching, I hope that some of the ways that I presented it make sense to you in this context. So that's a little bit about, I've given you a little bit of background about me and a little bit about why I think this is important, but I'd really love to hear from you, and I'd like to understand what's important to you. And Nicole has set up a poll, so Nicole, now would be the time to show the poll. So when this pops up, you'll have a chance to vote, and you can vote for as many as you want, but what I'd like to understand is what's important to you today. Is it to win business? Is it to get paid more? Is it to keep or grow your business with existing clients? Is it to get better at coaching, or is it to become known as an expert in your niche? So Nicole, anytime.
Okay, it's launched now, and we're getting people to respond. We'll give you 15 more seconds.
And then are you going to pop it up on the screen?
Yes, I'll show the results here. Okay, we're going to close the poll. All right, and we're showing the results now.
I can't see it.
Okay.
I can try to summarize. So sorry, I thought you could see it. So the #1 ranking response was win more business or win business.
Oh, good.
That's 44% of those.
Okay.
That's 44%. The second would be become known as an expert in your niche. That's 32%. So then it drops off considerably. Keep or grow business with existing clients was 12%. And then both get paid more and get better at coaching fall in at 7% and 6% respectively. So
okay.
Oh,
good. And nobody said become known as an expert.
Well, I mean, there are 32%. That was the second highest ranking response.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, win business 44% and become known as an expert was 32%.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. All right, good. So that's really helpful for me to understand what's on everybody's mind as we go through the rest of this session today. So I'm going to be walking through this ROI methodology for coaching to illustrate how that approach can help you with all 5 of these. So just even to kind of illustrate why I know this approach works, why I know this ROI methodology works to help you with all of these issues is illustrated here on the slide. So in terms of winning business, just as an example, and this is a personal example, I have a full coaching practice here in Seattle. Within my first year of business, I got 17 coachees, which for me is a full practice because coaching is only a third of my business. And I didn't get any of that work by soliciting business. It was all sort of through word of mouth, and it was because I had been known as demonstrating return on investment for coaching, and so the business landed in my lap, 17 coachees within 1 year. So there's just one example of how this approach can help you win business. In terms of getting paid more, I have a partner that I work with based in Europe who has brought me in to measure the return on investment of some work that she has pitched to a large multinational organization. And she was the highest bidder on the coaching work, but because she had that ROI component as a part of her proposal, she had a competitive advantage, and so she won that business. So there's another example of how the ROI of coaching can help you get paid more. I have so many examples of how people have kept business by measuring business impact and calculating ROI. I've got examples of clients who have retained business in spite of some pretty drastic cost cutting that was going on. I also have an example of a coach who measured business impact and ROI of her coaching work inside of an organization during a time when her job was under review and she had the sense that her job was going to be eliminated. But instead, because she was able to demonstrate the impact of her work, not only did she keep her job, but she got a new job where she could spend all of her time being an internal coach at this organization. I've got an example of being able to grow business by measuring business impact. I have one client company that is measuring business impact and ROI of their programs as a pilot. And it's very likely that if we demonstrate positive ROI, they'll be able to grow that program and roll it out to multiple locations. And then, of course, the approach also allows you to get better at coaching, and you'll see an illustration of that when I walk through a case study. And then finally, this approach can really help you become known as an expert in your niche. And I was really excited to see 32% of you said that that was important to you. When you have data, when you have quantitative data that illustrates how you are an expert, it really helps you gain a primary position in the marketplace. So a couple of examples. I have a client company that where we measured business impact and return on investment, and as a result of that work, they won an award from an international training organization, and then they were also highlighted in their professional publication. I have another client that had a study that we did together on measuring business impact and ROI that was published as a chapter in a book. And then I have a couple of clients, coaching clients, coaches, who have documented their work, and they have quantitative data, and they've used that data to position themselves as an expert in their particular niche area, and then they have been invited to speak either at conferences or on panels. So lots of examples of how this approach can work for you and help you win business and get paid more. So we're about to get into the real meat of the content, and at any point in time, feel free to tweet at me through Twitter. Here's a little snapshot of my Twitter page so that you know that you've landed at the right place. And if you can't, if you aren't able to get your questions answered here, you're also welcome to tweet at me, and I'll see if I can answer you through tweet. Okay, so some of our learning objectives for today. We're going to be talking about the 5 different ways that you can measure coaching success. Some of those include monetary impact and ROI, but you don't always have to measure at that level. We'll also talk about how you can contract your coaching engagements for monetary business impact, how to report ROI in a way that's credible and repeatable, and then also how to document the success of your work, and so that you can use that to market your services. So for our agendas, I'll be walking through a very high-level overview of the ROI methodology, and then we'll go through a case study to illustrate how the approach comes to life so you can see how it actually works in practice. And then we'll talk about how do you contract for business impact. So how do you take things like, I want to communicate better, or I want to be more inspiring. How do you translate that into a business impact measure? And then finally, we'll talk about ways that you can document your success for marketing. So here we go. So first off, let's start off with ROI. Whenever we think about ROI methodology, of course, what comes to mind is the ROI formula. And here's an example. If you've got a calculator, or maybe if you've got an iPhone, you've got a calculator on your phone, you can go ahead and give this a shot. So you can see if you can do that formula. And if you've done it, you'll see that you've got 76%. So let me walk through what this means. So ROI, which is return on investment, the formula, the way it works is that this first number, $750,000, represents monetary benefits after isolation. In other words, this is the monetary benefit after we have isolated it from all of the other things that could have contributed to that monetary benefit. And then we take out the cost of the program. So this is the total fully loaded cost of the program. And what I mean by that is it's not only the out-of-pocket cost of the program, but the indirect cost as well. So participants' time, facilities, administrative costs, and so on. And then we divide that number by the cost of the program. We multiply that times 100, and we end up with 76%. So what this is telling us is that for every $1 invested in this coaching program, we got 76 cents back after all costs of the program were captured. Now, lots of times when I present this, people will say, 76%, that looks low. I can go onto Google and I can type in ROI of coaching, and I can see studies that say 700% ROI. And it's true. We have seen studies that have as high as 700% return on investment. In fact, in the book that Mark mentioned at the start of the session, there's a study in there that's 1,500% return on investment. So we can see a very high ROI. But 76% is actually good. And in fact, I like it when the number is not huge, because when it's a big number, that means that we have to work really hard to defend that number and to ensure to our readers or our listeners or the people that we're trying to influence how that number is credible. And so I actually like it when the number is a little more conservative. It tends to be a little bit more believable. But any number over 25% is viewed as a very good ROI. Because if you think of investing your money today, how many places can you put your money and see a 76% return on investment within a year? There's not very many, so 76% return on investment is actually pretty good. So that is the easiest step of the entire methodology, is this formula. What is hard about the whole approach is getting to these numbers. How do we get to this number, $750,000? And I'm going to illustrate that when we get to the case study. But this is the easiest step of the whole approach. The ROI methodology includes several different pieces. We think of this as the ROI puzzle, and there's many different pieces to the puzzle. I'm going to walk through all of these with you today. The first piece of this puzzle is an evaluation framework, and so those are the levels of evaluation, and we'll walk through those in just a couple of slides. There's also a process model, and the process model is how do we begin the process and how do we end it, what are all the steps in between. And I'll walk through that at a high level as well. We also have operating standards and a philosophy. So we've got 12 guiding principles that we use every time we use this approach, and I'll walk through those. And then all of this is really brought to life through implementation and then documenting our work through case applications. Every single coaching engagement or every single coaching program is different. And so every time we implement this approach, we learn more about what works well in coaching and what we can do to improve the coaching process and to improve the results that we're seeing. So it's through implementation and practice and documenting our work that we really can use this approach to get better in our work. So on this slide and the next slide, I've got the process model. So this is slide 1 of 2. I'll walk through this at a very high level. On this slide, you can see that there's a stage 1. Stage 1 is what I think of as where we do the heaviest lifting. It's the hardest work is that first step. And this is in evaluation planning, and what we're doing at this stage is we're gaining agreement and alignment with our key stakeholders about what we are trying to accomplish with our coaching program. What will success look like? And in this approach, when we're measuring business impact and ROI, we're also trying to understand what are the business impacts that we're trying to see if we're working inside of an organization, or if you're working with, let's say, somebody in the context of career coaching, you might be trying to understand what would success look like for them in terms of a monetary context under career coaching if that was what you wanted to do. So stage 1 is evaluation planning, where we're getting clear about what are we trying to accomplish, and then we develop our evaluation plans. So we develop those planning documents that outline our study and how we are going to measure the success of our work. That's stage 1. Again, I mentioned up front, that's where the heaviest lifting happens. Then we implement our solution, which means that we're doing our coaching work right after evaluation planning is done, then we're doing our coaching work. And then we move on to stage 2, where we're collecting data. Depending upon how long the coaching engagement is, we might collect data twice. So we might collect data at some sort of midpoint, and then we may collect data at the end of the coaching engagement. If it's a short coaching engagement, we may only collect data at the end of that coaching engagement. Again, every coaching engagement is different and unique, and so it really depends upon what we are trying to accomplish and what makes sense for that particular engagement. So those are the first 2 stages. After data collection, then after the coaching has ended, then we move on to stage 3, where we do data analysis. And a couple of things that I want to point out in this stage. The first is that we isolate for the effects of the solution. And what that means is that anytime we implement our coaching solution, there are other things going on at the same time that could be influencing the impacts that we're seeing. And so to be credible in our work, we have to isolate for the effects of our coaching solution. We have to separate out all of the other things that could be influencing the results that we're seeing and isolate just for coaching. So that's one of the key steps that happens in data analysis. We also have to convert data to monetary value. What that means is that, let's say you're working with a manager who runs a technology team, and let's say they're experiencing high turnover in their teams, and they want to work with you in coaching to help improve retention. And so they improve retention by, let's say, 5% over the course of 12 months of working with you. Then you have to take that 5% improvement and convert that into monetary values. And there's a way to do that, but that's essentially what we're referencing here in this particular step. Other things that we do at data analysis is we also capture costs of this solution. So we look at fully loaded costs. So not just the cost to pay the coach, but the participant's time or the coachee's time, any facilities costs, any administrative costs. If you're working with coaches inside or coachees inside of an organization, there might be somebody who's kind of managing that whole process, so their time related to that. So we capture the fully loaded costs of the solution. We also might identify intangible measures. And intangible measures are those things that we could monetize if we wanted to, but the steps to get there are so lengthy that it may not be credible, so we choose not to monetize those. Those are called intangible measures. Those include things like job satisfaction, customer satisfaction, workforce effectiveness. We could monetize all of those if we wanted to, but the steps to get there are likely not credible, so we don't monetize those, and we just capture them as intangible measures. And then, of course, at this stage, we also calculate the ROI. That's that formula that we walked through on one of the first set of slides. And then after we have done all of that work, then we have to communicate our results out, and there's multiple ways that we can communicate our results out to various stakeholders. So that's an overview of the process model. That's an illustration of where do we start and how do we end in this methodology. On this slide and the next slide, I've got the guiding principles. And there are 12 guiding principles. I'm not going to walk through each one by one. But what I want to point out on this slide is guiding principle number 6. So guiding principle number 6 says, if no improvement data are available, it's assumed that little or no improvement has occurred. What that means is that if you're working with, let's say you're working with 4 coachees in an organization and you're measuring business impact and ROI of the work that you're doing with them. And let's say that you're dependent upon your coachees for providing you with monetary impact data at the end of your coaching to understand what was the impact to the organization. So if 2 of those people give you monetary impact data, but let's say 2 of them don't, you cannot take the average of those who did give you data and assume that the people who didn't give you data had the average of the people who did. So they just get big zeros for their monetary impact data if they don't provide you with any data. So what this guiding principle does for you then is that it helps you to be very conservative in your approach and how you present data back at the end of your study. So that allows you to be very credible when you're communicating your results back. And the other thing that this particular guiding principle does is it sort of illustrates how important it is to have engagement at the start of the process for everything that people will be doing to participate and give you data in the end. So once again, there are 12 guiding principles. These are 6. I walked through one of them. Here are the other 6 guiding principles on this slide, and of course this is all in your handout for reference. So those are the guiding principles, and now I'm going to walk through the levels of evaluation. This is the evaluation framework. And I'm guessing that many of you have seen this before. Those of you who have worked in training and development or learning and development, or you have worked inside organizations and you've been responsible for measuring the success of training programs, you'll be really familiar with this framework. So these are all of the levels of evaluation that we use. And when we're measuring return on investment, we don't just look at ROI. We capture data for all of these levels. So I'm going to walk through each one. So this first level of evaluation is reaction, satisfaction, planned action. This has to do with people's thoughts, feelings, opinions, reaction to the coaching that they experienced with you. So that's level one. The next level is learning. And learning has to do with the insights gained, learning gained throughout the coaching process, self-awareness gained. If you're using coaching to support a training program, it might be the learning that they're continuing to build upon from the training program. So this is all of the changes in knowledge that they're gaining as a result of coaching. So that's level 2, learning. And then level 3 takes the learning one step further. And so at this stage we're saying, okay, it's great if you learned something, but ultimately we want you to do something different. So this has to do with what did you apply or implement or do differently. And this level of evaluation measures the changes on the job, what behaviors you may have applied. If you're working in a leadership development context or doing leadership coaching, you're looking for changes in behaviors that might relate back to a 360. So lots of different ways that we can look at level 3, application, implementation. And then at level 4, this is where we're taking things one step further again. So at level 2, we're saying, what have you learned? At level 3, we're saying, okay, what have you done with that learning? And at level 4, we're saying, what's the impact that it has made for you? What's the business impact or the monetary impact that you're seeing as a result of these changes in behavior? And then finally, level 5 is return on investment. And so at this stage, we're saying, okay, so great if we saw a business impact, but did we spend less on the coaching than we did in terms of the benefits that we got back? So it's possible to spend more or invest more in coaching than you see in terms of monetary gain, but at level 5, we're looking to see that we spent less on coaching than we got back in monetary value. So these are all of the levels of evaluation, and again, when we're measuring business impact and return on investment, we're looking at all of these levels of evaluation, not just business impact and return on investment. So now what I'd like to do is walk through a quiz with you and see how well I did in terms of helping you understand each one of those levels. And so you can see some examples of items that might be on some type of questionnaire or survey that you would use at the end of a coaching engagement if you were working inside of an organization providing coaching services. So let's just go through each one. And what I'd like for you to do is to reference back to the levels of evaluation we just walked through and see if you can identify which level of evaluation each one of these are. So the first one is, I have learned 3 new communication techniques for influencing decision makers. So in your chat window, if you think that's level 1, reaction satisfaction, or 2, learning, or 3, behavior, or 4, business impact, or 5, ROI, type which level you think it is in the chat window, and then Nicole or Mark or somebody's going to tell me what the overall consensus is.
Well, I can tell you that most people are putting their responses in the question box, which is just fine. We can see them either way. But it seems to be the prevailing trend is a 2 or a 3, mostly saying 2.
2, yes, it is 2. And it's 2 because they're saying, I have learned. So there's your clue there. I have learned. So that's level 2, learning. Let's try the next one. I have applied the 12-step leadership planning process. 1 is reaction, 2 is learning, 3 is behavior, 4 business impact, 5 ROI. What are we seeing, Mark?
Lots of 3s.
3s. Very good. I have applied. You've got it. I have applied. So this is about doing something. So number 3, I've used 5 of the 7 best ways to build positive working relationships within the last 30 days. Which one is that?
So now we're getting a bit of a mixture between 3s and 4s.
All right, very good. So this one is 3. Again, what we're talking about is I have used, so they're talking about application. This is something that they have done. So building positive working relationships, that has to do with they're doing some kind of behavior on the job. Number 4, I'm communicating much better. Which one is that?
We're getting a whole big mishmash here of 3s, 4s, and 1s. 3s,
Yeah,
4s, and 1s.
Yeah, this one now, they're getting a little bit harder as we go. So this one is actually, it's a very poorly written level 3 item. I would want this one to be much more specific in terms of what's the behavior that they're actually doing differently about communication. But this one would either be a level 1 in terms of a reaction. This is their thoughts or feeling or opinion. But I'd like to see it be more specific to capture a specific communication behavior that they were doing differently, and then it would be a level 3. Okay, number 5, I've used the concept of deferred judgment in 5 scenarios within the last 3 months. Which one is that?
Mostly 3s coming through right now, behavior.
All right, good. I have used. That's it. Number 6, 60 days after completion of coaching, my team rated me as a more effective leader.
This is pretty consistently level 4.
Level 4. Level 4, almost, maybe. I guess if you could monetize effective leader, it might be. I would call this one a level 3. And I'd call it a level 3 depending upon how they were getting that information. But if the team is rating them as a more effective leader, it's based on some behaviors that they're doing. And so in some way, we're sort of assuming that they're getting some feedback that they've been rated differently. So this would be still just about behavior, level 3. Number 7, by the time the coaching program ended, I learned how to improve revenue. Which one is that?
Mostly 2s coming across.
Good. I have learned. It's a little bit tricky because we're talking about revenue. So you might think it's business impact, but it is still just about learning at this stage. So level 2. How about number 8? I have improved workforce effectiveness as a result of my coaching.
Seeing 3s and 4s coming across.
3s and 4s. Yeah, this one's a little bit tricky. We could monetize workforce effectiveness. There might be a way to do it, but the steps to get there wouldn't be very credible. So this one counts as one of those intangible measures that I mentioned when we walked through the process model. So we call it level 4, but it's an intangible benefit, so we don't actually monetize it. It's a little bit tricky. Number 9, there was a 10% increase in customer retention at the conclusion of the coaching program. Which one is that?
So we're seeing some 4s and also a few 5s in here.
Yep. All right. So this one's level 4, business impact, because we're looking at, we could monetize customer retention. We could put a monetary business impact measure to that. And number 10, productivity within our unit increased by 2% by the conclusion of the team coaching.
Again, seeing 4s and 5s pretty consistently.
4s and 5s. All right. This one is also business impact because we could monetize productivity. So productivity, we're looking at some kind of cost reduction related to labor costs. Once we have our costs, when we have captured the cost of the solution, then we can calculate ROI. But when we only have the benefit, the improvement amount, then we're still at level 4. So we can calculate ROI after we have the cost, and that's why that one is not yet ROI. It's still just business impact. So very good. You did a great job of identifying those levels, especially because I threw a couple of tricky ones in there, and you caught those. So well done. And now I'd like to hear a little bit from you. And again, we'll have you type in the chat window, and Mark can tell me what you're saying. But I'd really like to understand what level you are currently capturing data. And my hunch is that even if you don't have a formal way of capturing data, you might have an informal process or way that you're evaluating. And so at what level are you currently capturing data, and at what level would you like to capture data? So you could just type in your chat window, you could type in current and the level that you're at, and you could type in future and the level that you want to be at.
Well, this is an absolute mess. No, I'm just saying, it looks like most people are currently capturing, I would say, below level 3, 1, 2, or 3.
Okay. All right,
and then
good.
on the more forward-looking, it's obviously desired to aspire more to 4 and 5.
Yeah, all right, good. All right, good. So that you all are interested, it sounds like many people are interested in getting to those higher levels of business impact and ROI. Excellent. Okay, so that's great to hear. And by the way, for those of you who do want to measure business impact and ROI, I just want to say you are pioneers, because although this is a topic that a lot of people talk about, the reality is very few are measuring business impact and ROI. But for those of you brave, pioneering people who want to begin measuring business impact and ROI, you will really be a leader in the marketplace in terms of doing that. You will set yourselves apart from other coaches who are not yet measuring at that level. So it's always better to be first in the market. It's not as much fun to be last to market, so good for you for having the kind of courage and the interest to take a leadership role in the marketplace. For those of you who are measuring at level 1 and thinking that level 1 isn't useful, I just want to share with you a little bit of story about how level 1 can still be useful. So if you're thinking that level 1 isn't good enough, level 1 data is actually very useful, and that's illustrated here on this slide. This is actual data, this is real data that came from a leadership program that I designed and ran in an organization. And we developed this program during a time when the organization was going through a very turbulent experience because of what was happening in the marketplace. And at that time, a lot of our leadership programs had been put on hold because the focus was sort of on what was all of this turbulence that was happening in the marketplace. But I was able to identify a need with our emerging leaders, and what was happening is that our emerging leaders were feeling fairly defeated because the marketplace was so rough and, you know, not uncommon in today's world, in fact, still today. But they were feeling fairly defeated, and I pitched an idea to bring a leadership program to the organization that would help them be successful in terms of facing a lot of this turbulence and challenge that they were facing, and also help them feel successful. And so I got some funding for the program, and if you had gone by the word of mouth buzz in the organization, you would have thought that this was the best program ever developed. And in fact, when we collected data at the end, you can even see some of the really positive results. So you can see that, you know, over 100% of the participants believe that the program was relevant to their job, and 100% of the participants believe that it was a value add, and 100% of them believe that the program was effective, and 100% said that they would recommend the program to others. But look at this. Only 42% of them said the program was important to their success at the present time. And so here we thought this was the greatest program ever, but if you remember what I said in sort of the beginning was we wanted a program that helped them be successful and also feel successful, and yet we missed the mark. And so we took this data back to all of the participants at the end of the program, and they said, you know, tell us about this. How could a program be relevant, value add, effective, and you would recommend it, but it didn't help you, it wasn't important to your success? And they said, you know, the program was great. It was great content. I learned so much. It was relevant. I did feel it was a value add, but it wasn't specific enough to what I need in my day-to-day role to help me be successful? And with that information, we were able to go back to the executive team and say, guess what? We want more money because what we want to do is we want to spend less money on classroom-based training, which was what this program was mostly focused on, which is kind of broad stroke, and we want to invest more money in coaching, which will help us be more specific to the needs that the participants have to help them be successful in their roles. So I was able to use level 1 data to understand what was working well about a program, what we needed to improve, and go get more money to make the program even better. So for those of you who are thinking level 1 isn't good enough, here's a great story of how you can use level 1 data. I also have a coach client that I'm working with who is working in one particular industry where she wants to be viewed as an expert, and she has all kinds of stories about how her work in that particular industry is unique and different and how she might be seen as an expert. But it wasn't until we took all of her questionnaire data, level 1 data, and started to organize her data by industry, and we were able to separate out this one particular industry where she's really trying to establish herself as an expert. We were able to separate out that data from all of the other types of clients from different industries and identify key differences in her work with those clients in that industry. And now she's getting invited to speak at different conferences because now she doesn't just have stories, she has tangible, quantifiable data just at level 1 that separates her from all of her peers that are also trying to establish themselves as experts in that particular industry. So level 1 data can still be useful. Okay, so now we are going to walk through a case study that measures business impact and ROI to illustrate how this approach comes to life and how you can use it. And I love this case study because it's a small case study and it's one that you could replicate in your own work. And it comes from an organization based in Europe that was contemplating implementing a leadership development program to supplement some of the other leadership programs that they had in place at the larger corporate level. And so they had recommended a leadership coaching program, but the program was expensive. It was intended for 20 participants over a period of 6 months. And so the company said, before we invest all of this money in this coaching, we want to know if it works. And we want to know what could work well about the program and how to make it really great and what's the monetary impact. So this case study illustrates that pilot study. And it was a study of just 4 participants over a period of 3 months. Each participant, each coachee participated in 1 training day, and they also participated in 6 coaching sessions. 3 of those coaching sessions were 60 minutes each. I'm sorry, 3 of those coaching sessions were 90 minutes each face-to-face, and 3 of them were 60 minutes each over the telephone. And these are the results. So on this slide, you'll see the reaction and satisfaction data. So these are actually all of the items that we used in that questionnaire. And we used a 1 to 5 rating scale with 5 representing strongly agree, 1 representing strongly disagree. We were looking for an average rating of 4.0 on a 1 to 5 scale, and you can see that we met our mark on reaction and satisfaction. By the way, all of these items on this slide are items that have been shown over time across multiple studies to be highly correlated to behavior and application. So in other words, when people agree positively to a program being relevant to their job, they are also more likely to have applied something that they have learned from the experience. Likewise, when people rate a program as important to their success, they are more likely to have applied something on the job related to the program. So there's a high correlation between the topics represented in each one of these items and whether or not people actually do something differently, and that's why we selected these particular items. On this slide, you'll see all of the learning items. And the first two items represent the unique nature of leadership coaching. So anytime you're running a leadership coaching program in an organization, every single participant has something that they're learning about themselves that's unique to them. And so we wanted a way to capture their learning on that unique thing that they were learning about themselves, and that's what those first two items represent. These 5 items at the bottom part of the questionnaire represent those things that the company said they wanted everybody in the emerging leader role to get better at and to learn about. And so these are more directive from the company in terms of what they wanted all the participants to learn about and get better at. You can also see on the slide that we captured data from both the executive, so the coach, or the coachee, as well as the coach. Once again, our rating scale was 1 to 5. Once again, we were looking for an average rating of 4.0 and a 1 to 5 scale. And you can see in this case, we met the mark in some cases, we missed the mark in other cases. And you can also see that in some cases there were big gaps between what the coachee saw and what the coach saw. Now, in this particular case, we're using self-report. So we're not using a quiz or a test to check or to test their learning. If we could use a quiz or a test, that would be the most credible source of data. But in this kind of context, we're using self-report. And because it's about learning, the executive or the coachee is the most credible source of data. So we put more weight on their learning items. When we took the data back to all of the participants at the end and shared this data with them, and we asked them, why do you think we met the mark in some cases and we missed it in others? And the response that we got back was that, I've only had 6 coaching sessions. I haven't even talked with my coach about some of these topics. And that made a lot of sense to us, that it was simply due to the length of time that they've been in coaching. On this next slide, then, we have all of the application and implementation items. And essentially what we do is we take all of those learning items, and all we do is we rephrase them into behavior items. So we restate them in ways that reflect changes in behavior or application. And once again, we collected data from the executive or the coachee as well as the coach. And in this case, I would say the coach is not a very credible source of data, simply because the coach was an external coach. They didn't actually see the coachee on the job. But the way the program was designed and what the company had asked for is they wanted the feedback from the coach, and so that's how we ended up setting up the design. Oftentimes what we're doing is we're asking for changes in behavior. We're asking for feedback from a manager or peers or direct reports, and we're looking at data from them. But in this particular case study, we're looking at data from the coach as well as the coachee. And once again, when we took the data back to all of the participants and said, why do you think we met the mark in some places and missed it in others, what they shared with us was the same response, which is, I just haven't had enough time yet to apply some of these things that I've been learning about in coaching, or in some cases they had not even talked about it yet in their coaching. Okay, so now we move on to business impact. So on this slide, you'll see business impact, and this is a summary of all of the data that comes from an action plan. So typically, when we're working with coachees and we're measuring business impact, we use some type of an action plan with the coachee to document what is the business impact that they're working towards through coaching. What is the baseline measure? How did they arrive at that baseline measure? And then at the end of the study, we capture the improvement amount, and we also isolate for the effect. So all of that data comes from an action plan that's used at the start of coaching, as well as a questionnaire that's used at the end of coaching. This slide is just a summary of all of that data. but I'm going to walk through one of them just to sort of illustrate how we, what this data means. So the first one comes from Executive 1, and again, there were 4 participants. Each participant had to identify at least one business impact measure, and Executive 1 or Participant 1 picked 2 business impact measures. I'm going to walk through the first one with you. So this first one has to do with growing value, which has to do with revenue. Whenever we measure revenue as a business impact, we only look at net profit. So we only look at the contribution that that revenue makes to the bottom line. And so in looking at this item, growing value has to do with the net profit generated from the gross revenue. And so Executive 1 is telling us that they saw 15,792 euros as a benefit during this period. And then the way that he got to that amount is a little bit of estimation, but he's actually working with some standard values because he's got revenue numbers. But the estimation is based upon the average of what that profit amount is. And then those next 2 columns represent how we isolate for the effects of the coaching program. You remember when I walked through the process model, one of the things that I pointed out in stage 3 was that we isolate for the effects of the program. So once again, anytime we implement a coaching solution or we provide coaching, there are other things going on that could be influencing or impacting the overall results. And specifically, we're talking about monetary impact now. So we have to be able to isolate for the effect of our solution in order to be credible with the results that we present back. There are 4 techniques to isolate for the effect. The most credible technique is the control versus experimental approach. And so if you probably remember the classic design of control versus experimental from a science class, in that approach, the experimental group gets the solution, the control group doesn't get anything, and you look at the differences between the 2 groups, and the differences are attributable to whatever the intervention was. In this case, we're talking about coaching. That's the classic design, and that's the most credible approach, but as you can imagine, in the real world, it's oftentimes not practical or not even possible to implement. And so while it's the best approach, we can't always use it. There's another approach called the trend line analysis. That's where we have historical data, and we look at the last 6 to 9 months of data, and we forecast out what the trend is. And then we look at what the actual is, and the difference between the actual and the trend can be attributable to our intervention or our coaching. That's another great credible approach, but many times we cannot use that approach because we may not have enough data. Or if our data is cyclical, and generally speaking, revenue data is cyclical. We have seasons when sales go up, and we have seasons when sales are flat. And so many times we can't use the trend line analysis. And then the next approach we have is called forecasting. And forecasting is where we have some type of measure that is correlated with a monetary measure, and we can forecast the monetary impact. So sometimes we can use that approach, but many times we can't because we don't have a correlation established. We don't have enough data to have a correlation established between some type of metric, like let's say customer satisfaction, and how that translates into revenue, so we can't use that. So we're left with this last approach, which I'm going to walk through, which is called estimation. It is the least credible approach, but many times it's the only approach we have available, and so we have to use it. So the way that it works is that the first thing that we do is we go back to our participant and we say, okay, so you saw 15,792 euros as a monetary benefit. What were all of the factors that allowed you to have that impact? And so they might say, well, I hired new staff, we got a new computer system that allowed us to be more efficient, we had a new marketing campaign, and we had a new product launch. All of those factors contributed to this monetary impact. And then we say, okay, great. Now take a pie and assume that that pie totals 100% and divvy up pieces of that pie for each one of those factors. And so that's what this executive did. And essentially what he said was all of those other factors were 70% responsible for this monetary impact that they saw, and only 30% was attributable to coaching. So that's the first step in this process. Now, we take it one step further and we adjust it again to make sure that we're really conservative in our approach. So we don't just take 30% of that 15,792. We adjust it one step further and we adjust for their confidence of their estimation. So anytime anybody makes an estimation, all of us, are more or less confident of our estimation, depending upon how much we know about what we're estimating about. So for example, if I were to ask each of you to tell me what is the temperature in your city today, you would all be able to tell me. You'd give me some type of estimate. And if I asked you, how confident are you that that's the right temperature, you'd be maybe 90% confident or 95% confident. You might even be 100% confident that your estimation was accurate. But if I asked you, what is the temperature in Seattle, Washington today, which is where I'm at, unless you're in Seattle, Washington, you would be less confident of your estimation. You might be 50% confident or maybe only 20% confident. And so that's what we want to account for here is the participants' confidence in their estimation. And so we asked him, how confident are you that 30% is the right percentage? And he said, I'm 85% confident. So now what we do is we take this 30% factored amount, we adjust it for his confidence. So we multiply it times 85%. That number then we take and multiply that times 15,792, and we get 4,026 euros. So only 4,026 euros is attributable to the coaching program. So we do that for every single line item, and in the end we ended up with 85,218 euros was the monetary benefit of this program after isolation. Okay, so now if you're still with me, now we'll go through the costs and then we'll do the ROI. So on this slide we have all of the costs. Remember I said earlier that we capture all of the costs, so not just the cost of the coaching fees, but the administrative costs, participant time, facilities costs. In this case, we also capture the cost of the evaluation, so the work that I did to do this work, and the total amount was 21,105 euros. And now we're ready for ROI. So you remember the ROI formula from the very beginning of the session, and in our formula we take the monetary benefits. In this case it was 85,218 euros minus the cost of the program, 21,105 euros, divided by the cost of the program times 100, and we get 304% ROI. It's a very high ROI, especially for a program that's only 4 participants and only 3 months long. But it's a high ROI because of a couple of factors. The first is all of the participants worked in sales, and they were selling a consumer product. So they had a very short selling cycle. So it's not like they were selling consulting services where it might take 9 to 12 months to sell the product or the service. They were selling a consumer good, so they could impact revenue fairly quickly. And they each had pretty large teams or organizations. So they had anywhere from 350 to 450 people in their teams or their organizations. So they were able to make changes and have those changes kind of ripple out and impact the marketplace pretty quickly. So it's very high ROI, and we recognize that. So that is the ROI methodology brought to life through the case study. And before I go on to contracting for business impact, I wanted to stop and see what questions you have and open it up for a couple of questions.
Okay, so Nicole, I hope that you might have identified a few questions. When we went through that polling exercise, it really made a much longer question box for us to scan. But I think, Nicole, do you have a couple of questions that you'd like to ask?
Sure. I'll start off here. I flagged one from the beginning from Paula. She asks, how do you capture for nonprofit and government?
Oh, good question. Excellent. So it would seem that ROI might not be relevant in that context because you're not trying to have a profit or a surplus. So in that case, though, you're still dealing with this organization still deals with money, and so instead of looking for profit, what you're looking at are ways to reduce costs, be more productive, get more work done with fewer or less monetary impact. So in that type of a setting, you would be looking at cost reduction, time savings, productivity, and you could still measure ROI in that context. But it's a good question.
Okay. I'm going to point out one that just came in from Cynthia Spradlin, and this is around the isolation of the effects of coaching. How would you suggest capturing for individual clients? Wait, I actually flagged the wrong question here because they were coming in so fast. But it was around the baseline measurements for deciding how much will be attributed to the coaching. How do you decide all of the things that could perhaps contributed to the impact in addition to coaching? Like, is there a thing that you've accomplished within an organizational case study that says, and these are the other things that we're competing against alongside the coaching?
It always depends upon the situation with the coachee. So every coachee is different, but there are always other things going on that could be influencing the monetary impact that they're seeing. So for example, we just completed a study a little while ago where just the fact of stating the goal of the improvement that the coachee wanted to make with their team was one of the factors. And then, of course, another factor was what they gained from their coaching conversations with their coach about how they could even improve that even more. So one of the factors for that person was just the fact that they said this was a goal that they had was to save time in one of their work processes. So every coachee will have their own factors, their own unique factors specific to them. So when you're capturing the monetary impact from your coachee in those one-on-one engagements, and by the way, we have an online training program where we teach people how to do this, then when you capture that data, then you also ask them to brainstorm what were all of the things that contributed to helping you make that change or make that improvement. And then you take that imaginary pie, or you could even draw it on a piece of paper if you want, and you say divide up this pie to represent all of the percentages for each one of those factors, and it has to total 100%. So good question. So it's unique for each person.
Okay. And one I'm going to paraphrase that I saw earlier. So for those of us who might be on the call that are life coaches or not necessarily working inside organizations, and their goal is to make a client's life better or more enriching, what would your advice be to someone like that would want to apply this type of measurement in those settings?
Yeah, good question. And probably when we get to this next little section around contracting for business impact, that might be more relevant. But a couple of thoughts. First of all, it may not be important to your client to have a monetary impact or to be able to see the investment that they're making with you in terms of a monetary payoff for them. That might be a possibility. The other is through conversation you might ask them, okay, well, so if your life were to be better, how would that make a difference for you? So I can even sort of relate my own experience that I started off the session with today, where I worked with my mentor, who really, frankly, volunteered his time with me. But at the time, I was not at all fulfilled in the work that I was doing. I was successful, but I wasn't fulfilled. So at the time, I really just wanted to have a greater fulfillment and utilize my talents better. But if he had helped me sort of quantify that and think about that in terms of monetary impact, what I might have been able to say is, that I wouldn't feel as burnt out. I might be even more successful. I might even make more money than I'm currently making if I'm aligning what I'm naturally good at with something, some other type of work. So I might have been able to quantify it in that way if he had ever asked me those types of questions. So it's possible you could get there through facilitating the conversation. What would it mean to them? All right, so if you have more questions, I know we can't get to everybody, but if you have more questions, you can also tweet at me through Twitter at Lisa Ann Edwards. You can find me there, and I might be able to answer you through a tweet later today. All right, so that last question really illustrated this next concept around contracting for business impact, or we might even just call it contracting for monetary impact. And that is that typically coaches come to us, clients come to us with goals that don't sound like monetary impact. They come to us and they might say, I want greater self-awareness. Or an HR person might refer somebody to us because they say this person needs greater self-awareness. Or they may say, I need to be able to innovate, or I need to be more creative. Or they may say, I need to sleep better, or I need to communicate better, or I need to be more engaging, and so on. All of these different types of goals. But the first step is to really think about what level are each one of these goals, and then that will help you facilitate a discussion to get to business impact. So again, you want to think of these coaching goals in the context of that levels of evaluation that we walked through earlier. So self-awareness, that's a learning. So that's level 2. We're at level 2. So if we're starting off at level 2 with the client, we have to understand, okay, well, if you were more self-aware, then we have to move them to level 3. What would you be doing differently if you were more self-aware? What kinds of things would you be doing differently if you felt you were more self-aware? And then we want to take them from level 3 to level 4. Okay, well, if you were doing that differently, how might that make an impact to your life? If you're talking in the context of life coaching, or how would that make a difference to your business if you're talking in the context of business? In this next one, innovation, in innovation, that's already level 4. We just need to put that concept in a monetary impact context. So if you were innovating, what would happen? How would that make a difference to your business? What would be different? This next one, sleeping better, we might think of that as a level 1. That's a reaction. I'm sleeping better. Okay, if you're sleeping better, what would be going on in your life that would be different? And we start to move them to level 2. And then once we get them there, we move them to level 3, and so on. Communicating better, we might say, well, if you were communicating better, what would that look like? What would be different for you? How would that make a difference to your team, and so on? So you can kind of see a little bit about how I'm moving through those levels. So think of the coaching goals that they come to you. Think of those in terms of those levels of evaluation. Think about what level are they talking at, and then you want to move them up or down depending upon where they start. So if they're starting out with a topic that relates to level 2, they're learning, like this self-awareness, then you want to understand what would they be doing differently, what would the behavior be, and if that's what they were doing differently, what would the result be for them in terms of money or business impact, and then that's how you can get there. Or if they start off at innovation, with innovation, you can fairly easily get to monetary impact. If you were innovating, what would be different? Well, I might be launching a new product sooner or faster. Well, what impact would that have to the business? Well, we'd be generating revenue. and so on. So that's really easy. But then you want to work backwards to understand, well, what would you be doing differently? So now we're going back to level 3. And then what would you need to learn? What kind of learning or awareness would you need to have in order to do that differently? And so now we're going back to level 2. We do that because even when you have the business impact identified, you also have to understand, what is this person, why aren't they doing it today? What do they need to learn about in order to start doing that? And that helps shape what those coaching conversations are going to be about. So that's in general what we're doing. And some opening questions that you can use to get the conversation rolling are things like, how did you decide that coaching was needed? Or what inspired you to begin coaching? What are you hoping will change or be different? These are probably all common things that you already ask. But then there's a couple of questions here. How will behavior changes result in business or monetary impacts? And questions to get you started in having those conversations. And again, we teach this whole process in the the training that we do. And by the way, we're offering I'm offering 3 seats. We're giving away 3 seats if you decide to enter to win a contest that we're running. Let me illustrate a little bit about how some of these coaching engagements are contracted for business impact, and these are all real coaching examples, coaching client examples. The first one is a coachee who was working on improving wanted to better engage their team. Their office was going to be closed after they had launched a new marketing technology application. And so this leader wanted to keep their team engaged and inspired. And so they worked with their coach to keep their team engaged and inspired, and they were able to launch their technology product to market, and then they were able to monetize that by looking at the number of visits converted into a certain amount of revenue. And you can see the annual revenue that they saw was $754,000. That was before isolation. In another example, an emerging leader was working on a CEO pet project that didn't have aspiration for generating a lot of revenue, and so he wanted to work with his coach on influencing the CEO to de-scope the project so that it would cost the company less in terms of labor costs, and they would launch it faster. And you can see that he was able to launch the product in 3 months instead of 12 months because he was able to influence the CEO to de-scope the project, and then you can see how much he saved in terms of labor costs. And then in the last example, this particular emerging leader was working on being more productive with his team and ingesting online electronic content faster, getting it online sooner so that they could realize revenue quicker. And you can see the net result was they generated $2 million in revenue. Remember, in revenue, we always look at profit amount. But he had some other things going on at the same time. He hired some team members, so there were other factors. This is before isolation. But essentially what he was working on with his coach is how to be more productive, manage time better with his team. So those are 3 examples that you can also look back at about how you take what people are working on in coaching and translate that into business impact. And then once you have done that work and document your success, there's lots of ways that you can use your success to help market yourself. So if you've got a case study, you can publish your case study in a book. You could post it on a website as a free download. You could use it as a leave behind with a prospect. You could submit your case study in any proposal that you're making to a client, or you can use it at a conference or at a meeting or if you're on a panel. And then you could also summarize your work with your coachees in some type of summary or overview. And again, you could submit that with a proposal. You can post it on your website. You can provide it to a client and ask them to use it when they're making referrals or introducing you to people who are prospective clients for you. And in that way, ROI can be a lot of fun. This is when ROI is fun, when the work is complete. And on this slide, you'll just see a quick snapshot. Here's one case study of, sort of what it looks like when it's completed. And then on this next slide, you just have a quick snapshot of what a summary or an overview can look like as well.